Interpersonal effectiveness is being able to relate to others in positive and proactive ways, rather than relying on emotional aggression as a tool for controlling others. Often people who use emotional aggression as a coping mechanism have problems dealing with conflict. This tendency manifests as conflict avoidance. The typical dynamic in conflict avoidance is that when something upsets them, they avoid talking about it and sweep it under the rug until things continue to build. Finally, the avoidance of conflict gets to be too much, and such a person explodes in an episode of emotional aggression. The way to avoid such build-ups to explosion is to address the issues as they come up. By learning to deal with life's little stressors as they occur, we learn to deal with conflict in positive ways instead of in emotionally aggressive ways. The way to deal with conflict in a positive way is to realize that you're not responsible for anyone's feelings but your own. If you avoid conflict out of a fear of upsetting others, first ask yourself why you think they would be upset. Worrying about the emotional reactions others might have in a given situation is usually a sign of poor boundaries with that other person. Either they routinely cross your boundaries, or you routinely cross theirs. And when this happens, the result is usually conflict. Conflict is the root of most emotional aggression. The way to solve this problem is to establish good boundaries in all of your relationships. A sign of poor boundaries is the belief that another can be responsible for your own emotional well-being, or that you can be responsible for another's emotional well-being. A good rule of thumb when establishing boundaries is to ask yourself, am I being asked to do something that I wouldn't ask the other person to do? If the answer to that is yes, then there's probably an issue of poor boundaries in the relationship. Here are some signs that you may have poor boundaries with others. Conversations on emotional topics result in anxiety and discomfort. You avoid conflict until things build up, then you explode. You feel responsible for other people's feelings. You're afraid to say no. You feel guilty when you do say no. You rarely speak up for yourself because you fear it might lead to conflict. You sometimes feel disrespected if you do stand up for yourself. You feel that you're constantly giving and never giving back. Others ask you to do things for them that you would never ask them to do for you. If you answered yes to more than half of the items above, then you probably have poor boundaries. So why is it important to set boundaries? If we have poor boundaries, we begin to feel responsible for the emotional well-being of others. We also expect others to be responsible for our own emotional well-being. By learning to set healthy boundaries, we minimize frustration, guilt, and anxiety for both ourselves and for others. Healthy boundaries keep others from manipulating us and help us to avoid the temptation to manipulate others. Here are some statements that you may use in your relationship with others to help you to practice setting healthy and good boundaries. Use these statements when you feel that one of your boundaries has been crossed or is about to be crossed. I care about you, but I can't be responsible for your problems. I care about you, but right now I need some time to be alone. I will not be the object of your hostility. Just because I disagree with you, that doesn't mean I don't still care about you. I do enjoy spending time with you, but today I have other plans. I don't allow others to make me feel guilty about myself. Even though I disagree with you, I still respect your right to feel the way you feel. In any relationship, there are core issues and there are issues that can be compromised on. A core issue is one in which there can be no compromise. Refusing to accept physical or verbal abuse would be an example of a core issue. It would be ridiculous and absurd for an abuser to offer to compromise, I'll only beat you up on Tuesdays. Physical abuse is an issue that is not open to compromise. It is therefore a core issue. Other examples of core issues might include drug abuse, marital infidelity, or verbal or emotional abuse. A compromise issue, on the other hand, is an issue that you're willing to compromise on. An example of a compromise issue might be the question of where to have lunch with a friend or a family member. You might have a lunch preference, but the choice is something that you'd be willing to compromise on to some extent. The way to distinguish a core issue from a compromise issue is that in order to compromise on a core issue, you would have to give up a part of who you are. In other words, you would have to change your core identity and core values in order to compromise. Having healthy boundaries means refusing to compromise on your core values and your core identity. In mindfulness, we call this core identity your true self. People without strong boundaries often feel used, disrespected, and walked on. It's easier to set very strong boundaries at the beginning of a relationship and then loosen them over time than it is to strengthen those weak boundaries. So if you find yourself saying, I will do this just this one time, you probably need to strengthen your boundaries. You cannot force anyone else to be responsible for your happiness, and likewise, you can't be responsible for anyone else's emotional well-being. By setting and keeping good boundaries, you make life easier for both yourself and for others.